My mind immediately jumps to the worst-case scenario as I glance at my ringing phone, seeing that my mother is calling me. It's after 2 in the morning, which can't mean anything good. I'm awake nights, having just moved back from Australia to be closer to my parents as they struggle with health problems. But I'm still working on Australia time, so I stay up nights and sleep during the day until I can figure something else out. Really, I don't mind staying up nights. I've always been able to operate on as little as 4 hours of sleep a day, and I've always liked the quiet of the night and early morning hours. I push away from my desk and stand, scooping my phone up, dreading the news I'm about to get. My dad is probably dead from a heart attack, or maybe he's had a stroke. He's had high blood pressure for a long time, and he's pretty overweight. I slide my thumb up the screen and put the phone to my ear. "Mom, what's going on?"
"Sherman,"
my mother says, nearly in hysterics.
"someone was in the house."
"What? Are you still there? Are you and Dad okay?"
I'm okay, I think. But your dad won't wake up. I don't know if they're still here. Can you come over?"
"Mom, did you call the police?" There's a pause.
"No, I wasn't."
"Call 911 right now, Mom. I'm on my way. Just stay on the line with them until I get there, okay?"
"Okay."
"Be there in 10 minutes. I hang up and rush around my apartment, grabbing my keys and jacket and pulling on my shoes. I make it to my parents' house in 8 minutes, thanks to the empty streets. I see no police as I arrive, which is not surprising given the nature of the call. My mother opens the door as I approach, and I'm relieved to see that she's intact and unharmed. She has the phone to her ear. I hear her say, "My son is here now." All the lights are on in the house, and it doesn't take me long to make sure the place is empty of intruders. As I look around, I see no evidence of a break-in. All the windows are locked, as is the case with the back door and the door to the garage. I know my parents better than to think that they went to bed without locking the front door. When I'm done searching the house, I stop in my parents' room. Really, it's more my father's room now, since my mother started sleeping in the guest bedroom down the hall. His snoring had gotten out of hand, but now I see that he's using a CPAP machine. He has the kind with the mask that goes over both the nose and mouth, delivering a continuous stream of air to keep his breathing regular while he sleeps. I shake his shoulder. "Dad, wake up!" I can tell he's still breathing by the rise and fall of his chest. His eyes dart back and forth under his eyelids, indicating deep sleep. My mother walks into the room, no longer on the phone with 911. She looks haggard. "What happened?" I ask, feeling for a pulse under my dad's jawline. I'm no doctor, but his heartbeat seems normal. "It was so strange," my mother says, not moving from her spot at the doorway. "I couldn't sleep, so I decided to watch television downstairs. Suddenly, it was like I couldn't move. I was paralyzed in my chair. And that was when I saw the man, the intruder. He must have been dressed in all black because it was like I couldn't make out any of his features. He seemed like a shadow or something. He walked up and stood in front of me, and I still couldn't move. Then he reached out and touched my head and..." "And what?" I ask, starting to think she's just describing a vivid nightmare. "And then I fall asleep. As soon as he touched me, I fell asleep." I give her a sympathetic nod, looking down at my dad. There's a knock at the front door. "I'll get it," I say, moving away from the bed. As I turn to slide past my mother, she grabs my arm. "It wasn't a dream," she says, staring up at me. "It was real. It was real, Sherman." "Okay, Mom," I say. "But right now, we need to see what's wrong with Dad." She lets go of my arm, and I make my way downstairs. By the time we get back from the hospital hours later, I'm exhausted and worried about my father. He's in a coma, and the doctors have been doing tests all night, but they don't have any answers yet. My mom is distraught and also clearly exhausted. I get her set up for a nap in the spare bedroom while I go out to the couch. I think briefly about sleeping in my dad's bed, but it just seems too weird. I shut all the shades in the living room, but sunlight still streams through in narrow beams. My mind races as I try to get comfortable on the couch, putting a forearm over my eyes to block the light. It takes me a long time, but eventually, I crawl into a restless sleep. With my eyes still closed, I sense something standing next to the couch. At some point during my slumber, I removed my forearm from my eyes. I blink my eyes open, realizing as I do that I never bothered to take out my contacts. My eyes are so dry the person standing over me is nothing but a blurry shadow. At first, I think it's my mother, but as I blink some moisture back into my contacts, I realize with terror that it's not my mother. It's not even human. I try to move, to sit up or strike out with an arm, but I can't. The only parts of my body that seem to want to work are my eyelids. The figure looming over me is nothing but an ephemeral shadow. It reaches a hand toward my face, its number of fingers changing from 6 to 4 to 5 as the shadow shifts. Then it shimmers as it begins to take a solid, detailed form. I suck a ragged breath through flaring nostrils as I see my father standing over me. His face is smashed and bleeding. One eye hangs sickeningly out of his eye socket. His right arm is canted at an unnatural angle. A jagged piece of bone is sticking out of his forearm. His head lolls to one side on a neck that's clearly broken, discolored, and lumpy. The previously shadowy fingers become flesh and bone, although several of the digits are broken. As his mangled hand approaches my face, I can't even press myself further into the pillow on the couch. I feel his fingers enter my skull, and a column of black comes crashing down on my consciousness. I stare at my computer screen as the sun rises outside my window. My left hand jerks and spasms on its own. That has been happening more and more lately. My project management inbox shows no new tasks, no new messages. My clients have been dropping off like cultists at a Kool-Aid party. A month has now passed since my mother called me to tell me that there was an intruder in the house. My father has not improved, although he also hasn't worsened. He breathes on his own with the help of a simple device called an OPA, which keeps his airway open so he doesn't suffocate in his sleep. For the first week, I visited my father every day. Now, I haven't been in over a week because there is something wrong with me. Every time I go to sleep, the nightmare version of my father visits me. Sometimes he comes in my dreams. Sometimes I'm wide awake when he comes. He stands over me and watches me, his face bloody and smashed, arm shattered, neck broken. I'm afraid if I go to the hospital to see him, I will find him in that condition, broken, bleeding. So I don't go. I've also been ignoring my mother's phone calls. She complained of nightmares for the first week after my dad fell ill. Then she hardly talked at all until it was time for me to pick her up so we could go to the hospital. She grew haggard, the bags under her eyes deepening, her skin seeming to hang off her bones as if all her connective tissue had loosened. It's been a week since I've seen her, and I don't want to know what she looks like now. Sometimes I think she's already dead. I think my father is dead too. Sometimes, when I wake up from a nightmare, I think I'm in hell. The thoughts in my head are no longer my own. They're foreign, even though they speak in my inner voice. They whisper things to me, telling me things I never wanted to know. Right now, one of them whispers that my mother is going to call me. I drag my blank gaze from my computer screen and down to my phone on the desk. The black screen lights up. It's my mother. Answer it. A chorus of mine, but not mine voices says in my head. Answer it. Answer it. Answer it. Answer it. I grab the phone and swipe my thumb up, not saying a word as I place the device to my ear. My mother doesn't speak for a long time, but I can hear her breathing. Finally, she says in a raspy voice, "Come home." The whispers in my head start again as I hang up the phone. They say this all started with my mother. It all started the night she called me over. Later that day, I slept on the couch. And that's when my life began to fall apart. I stand up from my desk and move like a zombie through the house, grabbing my wallet and keys and pulling on my shoes. I'm barely aware of the drive over. The world is just coming awake as I pull up to the house and walk inside. The place is deathly quiet. I don't call out for my mother. I don't need to. The voices in my head tell me where she is. I head upstairs and find my mother in my father's room, lying on the side of the bed. There's an empty prescription bottle on the bedside table, right next to the CPAP machine that hasn't been used since my father was taken to the hospital. My mother's chest doesn't rise and fall. She's dead. Under the CPAP machine is a suicide note. I pick it up and read it. I expected to say something about how she can't live without my father, but that's not what it says at all. It's a brief note, and it's about me. My eyes gloss over as I read the paragraph, not really comprehending the words. But there is a sentence at the end that I latch onto. It's about how my father is better off in a coma because he was the one who first started complaining about seeing dark figures standing over him in the house.
He's the one,
The voices in my head say.
who started it all. He's the nightmare man.
The voices say. After all, it makes sense. He's the one who won't let me sleep. He's the one who shows up in my nightmares, tearing me apart with his silence, shoving his fingers into my skull, putting the voices there, stealing my mind away from me. I drop the suicide note to the floor before heading back out of the house. The drive to the hospital is a space of blankness that doesn't really register. When I reach my father's floor, I realize I'm pushing an empty wheelchair that I don't remember finding. I pull my father out of his bed and position him in the wheelchair. As I wheel him out of the room and down toward the elevators, I don't really know what my plan is, only that I need to get him out of here. To what end? I haven't thought that far ahead, but I'm sure the voices will help me. I glance behind me as a nurse walks into the room I've just vacated. I pick up the pace, rolling my father's limp body faster down the hall. A moment later, there's a shout from behind me.
Stop!
It's the nurse, telling me to stop. As I run faster, she yells for security, but I keep going. I turn the corner and come to the elevator alcove, pressing the button as people stare at me. Footsteps pound down the hall behind me. There's no time.
Stairs.
The voices in my head say.
Take the stairs.
The nearby stairwell door opens, and a young man with a bouquet of flowers in one hand steps through.
Hold the door!
I scream, turning and shoving my father toward the open door, picking up speed as I go. The young man looks at me in confused shock, but he still holds the door open.
Faster.
The voices say.
Faster. You must get away.
I barrel through the door, bent over and shoving my father. At the last moment, sanity comes back to me. I try to stop, dragging my heels and yanking back on the wheelchair. My father's body flops forward and falls, smashing face first into the concrete stairs. He tumbles down, his neck turning the wrong way, his arm twisting under him and snapping. He comes to rest in a heap at the bottom of the stairs. Strong hands grab me from behind and pin me to the wall. The nurse from the hall shoves the wheelchair out of the way and runs down the stairs. As she turns my father over, I see what I've done to him. His face is smashed and bleeding. One eye hangs sickeningly out of his eye socket. His right arm is canted at an unnatural angle. A jagged piece of bone is sticking out of his forearm, and his head lolls to one side on a neck that's clearly broken. The handcuffs are tight as I'm loaded into the back of the police car. There are so many witnesses. To them, it looked like I wasn't trying to stop my father from going down the stairs. It looked like I meant to throw him down. Who knows? Maybe I did. I can't tell anymore. The two officers get into the front of the vehicle, separated from me by a thick plastic partition. We pull away from the hospital and into traffic. The two police officers chat in the front seat. It's just another Wednesday for them. I look out the window, and I think about what my mother's suicide note said about me, about how the figure she started seeing was me, but she didn't know it at first. because my face was so badly injured and there was glass sticking out from my neck and there was so much blood. But in the end, she was sure it was me who was haunting her nightmares, just like my dad was haunting mine. So that's why I'm not really surprised when we pass into an intersection on a green light and I see the semi-truck bearing down on us from the side. I don't scream, but the voices in my head do. They scream with utter joy. The inspiration for this story comes from SCP-3060 in the SCP Foundation archives. If you liked this story, there are plenty more like it on my other podcast, The SCP Experience. I publish regular episodes, so be sure to subscribe or follow for updates on new horror episodes on the SCP Experience podcast. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.